Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Ann Sparaco. Today, we're exploring valuable lessons on change, growth, and leadership. We can all learn from a transformation case study at one of the world's most esteemed philanthropic organizations, the Ford Foundation. And joining us to talk about this today is Diane Headley, Vice President and Chief People Officer at the Ford Foundation. Welcome to All Things Work, Diane.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. We're so excited for this discussion and your background here. So let's jump to your start at the Ford Foundation. You joined Ford as HR director for the head office in New York, and then you became the vice president and chief people officer in June 2019. So walk us through this a little bit of the challenging environments you entered and the key indicators that really signaled change was needed in this situation.
Right. So when I joined Ford, we had basically a new leadership team in human resources. So I joined in December 2014. My counterpart, who oversaw the international offices, HR for the international offices, joined a week later. My vice president, who hired us, joined maybe 4 months before. And her reporting relationship to the president was new. Prior to her joining, the function reported to, I believe it was administration, and didn't have a seat at the executive table. And so there were a lot of changes happening for the function. The seat at the executive table, these two new directors of HR who had responsibility for New York and the regional offices, a new director of professional development or people and organizational development. And so there was a brand new leadership team. And that, I think, was great, gave us lots of opportunity for change, but it also changed the dynamic on the team itself. I mean, you have all these new leaders joining your team and not knowing how to work with them and what they were going to change. So we knew that that affected the dynamics. So that was one challenge that we walked into. Another was that Ford is headquartered in New York. We have 10 regional offices overseas, and each entity functioned like its own mini foundation. And so that was another challenge for us. And not just for the HR team, that was a challenge for the organization, who had a new president at the time whose mantra was one foundation. So our goal as an entire foundation was to become one foundation. And that was our goal in HR as well. So that was the second major challenge that we walked into.
And so, you talked about new leadership. When it comes to new leadership, building or renewing a trust between the leadership and the workers in the foundation overall, that's a challenge because trust is such a core of the HR function. And so, what specific steps or strategies did you use to rebuild the trust between your team, the broader organization, the new leadership? We know that this is not a small task.
Right. I would say the first steps for us were to rebuild the trust within our team. As I said, I think having a new leadership team, understandably, I think our team members, especially the longstanding team members, were nervous about what might change. What was our agenda coming in? Did we have an agenda coming in? Did we want to bring our own people in? So, those were never our goals. Our goals were to come in, assess the situation, and to make changes with the support of the team. Our assumption was that the team, we had a strong team in place and we wanted to build relationships. And so that was the first step for us, was to build trust within the team. And one of the ways that we went about doing that was to really assert that we start from a place of trust, and that our goal, even when mistakes are made, or maybe I should say, especially when mistakes are made, is to assess the situation, course correct, and then debrief and see what could be done to reduce the likelihood of an error or that same error being made in the future. And that it wasn't about doing an assessment to see who was to be blamed, right? And so obviously that took months, for us to build those relationships within our team. The other thing was to build the trust outside of our team, right? So with the employees and with managers and executives in our function. One of the things that I recall really clearly was coming in, doing a listening tour. And one of the questions I asked every single person and every group that I met with was, so when do you come to HR? And heartbreakingly for me, um, everybody said we never go to HR. And what really that wasn't true. I mean, what really was true was that they came to HR when there was a crisis, which is what you don't want to happen, right? You want to be in a position to address issues proactively if possible. And so there was, this view of HR being a place of policing and, as it typically is seen in so many organizations. So that, we had to partner up with managers, um, get to know them, have them get to know us. And over time, we started to see a trust in the function and in us as colleagues to them, that we were able to implement some other changes within the organization.
I love that, and I think a lot of people can relate to it, when you're talking about going to HR, you almost feel like you're sounding the alarm off to other things that you're trying not to be so alarming about, and people get nervous, they get worried, so that's so wonderful that you built that trust, you brought that in, and you created that listening tour to hear from them so you could understand before strategizing how to rebuild this trust. I absolutely love that you broke that down for us. And so we heard that there were a lot of great results out of these efforts. And my question really is, how did they contribute to the organization's overall, success and effectiveness? Because we know it's a domino effect. It impacts the overall foundation or organization.
One of the things I didn't mention in answering that question was it was about building trust and doing so through relationships, but it was also about implementing systems and structures and processes that were reliable. And I think when you have reliable systems, processes, structures, that helps to build trust. People know what's coming, they know what to expect. There's a level of fairness. And some of the very foundational things that we did initially were to establish the foundation as one global foundation, as I said before. So, for example, um, implementing an HR system that over time became our global HR system. We had a system in New York that had been used previously, but in the regional offices, they had their own systems in place, sometimes spreadsheets. And so that was one big thing that we did. The other was to establish global handbooks, right? And so looking across to see what are some of the policies that could be applied globally, meanwhile, taking into account the local circumstances, right? And then the final thing I'll mention was the implementation of a global compensation structure. And what that meant, I mean, all these things sound really simple, right? And basic. But what the compensation structure did was to establish again one foundation. And so an accountant in New York maybe not paid the same as an accountant in Latin America, but the jobs were on the same level, right? And so you know that wherever you sit geographically in the organization, if you hold a position like a grants manager or a director position, you know that you sit at the same level as someone who is in New York, right? So we were not downgrading positions in the regional offices, for example.
You talked a lot about how trust is an important factor when it comes to the HR function. But you also touched on a little bit about how it's critical for managers and senior leaders as well. You're talking about, like you mentioned, those personal relationships. They take you very far. So, how did you work with leadership to make sure not only the HR department was aligned, but they were aligned as well with and modeling trust building behaviors? It's some that's a quite a big challenge to take on.
One of my core values is integrity. I do what I say I'm going to do. I try to be open and transparent. If I can't do something, I say I'm not able to do it and I say why. And I think, I all of that maybe sounds trite, but I think that um honesty in relationships is crucial, right? And also, I think I might say something that might not be so obvious. Having confidence in the strengths that you bring to the table, um, and seeing yourself as a partner to other directors, to your peers, and not subordinate to, and having them see you that way, I think also help to build trust, right? I distinctly recall one manager, one director who had issues on his team, employee relations issues, and people were literally not talking to each other. And they were working around each other to get the work done. And he was allowing that to happen.
Mhm.
And he didn't know what to do. Right.
Right.
And so one of the things that, we talked about was this is just not acceptable. We come to work to get the work done. We don't have to like each other, but we sure have to respect each other. And we worked together to figure out how to deal with the issue, right? To have conversation with the employees one on one, doing role play with him and just getting him comfortable with something he wasn't comfortable doing because he'd not been called upon to do it. Um, and so, I mean, that seems like a really simple example, but it's really just showing the skill sets that you bring, acknowledging that others bring other skill sets, um, and using that partnership and complementary skill sets that you bring to get through issues.
And that confidence part, I think that's the first time I've really heard someone dive deeper into how confidence instills trust. And so we have a leader, one of our executives actually at SHRM, who is the leader of my whole division. She is so wonderful. Her confidence just brings people together because she feels confident in SHRM. She feels confident in her teams, and it changes the morale. And it makes people want to interact with one another, seeing their leader like that. And so I love that you brought that up because I feel like I'm seeing it in real time here. And especially for women, it's not very easy to come in with confidence immediately, especially when leadership's new, you're new, and everything's kind of over here and over there, and you're trying to pull it together. Jumping back to when you stepped into your current role, when you stepped into that in 2019, you also really spearheaded a rebranding process for the HR function. Can you tell me why you thought it was needed at the time?
Well, I I feel very strongly about the contributions of human resources to organizations and companies. I feel um, we tend to be the experts on culture, and culture is integral and essential to organizational success. And I had in mind an HR function that I wanted to lead, and I wanted it to be strategic. And so I first wanted to see how we were seen by our clients internal to the organization, but I also wanted to see how we see ourselves. And so we brought a consultant in to interview all of us on the team and interview some of our clients to see how are we seen by the organization? How do we see ourselves? And if our goal is to really focus on culture change, how do we want to be seen? And so that was what the rebanding was, just to get a sense of where do we stand? How far do we have to go if that's our goal?
It's kinda like you're holding up a mirror and you're looking into it and asking, "What do we need to change? What do we need to do better?" And I like that reflection. So you talked about your process a little bit. What was probably one of the biggest lessons you think you learned through that process that you felt was successful?
We were seen as advocates for the culture of the organization. Um, we wanted to be seen as partners, and we also wanted to be seen as experts. And and we also wanted to be seen as a part of the organization. It was interesting. We were asked to draw the organization and our team separately, individually. And every single person on my team drew HR outside of the organization circle. And so it's no wonder our clients didn't see us as part of the organization. We also didn't see ourselves as part of the organization. So I think that, if you ask what was the biggest lesson, that was the biggest lesson. And so that actually helped to change our language, right? And so now it's a small change, but now when we write communications, we really try not to use jargon, right? We use everyday layman's speak. Um, and we also, I really strive to say we and our, because I want, when you read a communication coming from me, you might not consciously pick up on it, but subconsciously, I hope the understanding is that I'm also an employee. I'm also a part of this organization, even though I'm leading this function.
Changes the mindset for everybody in the tiniest of ways. I love it. So I imagine rebranding was really just the first step of many. So you started your current role in 2019, and many of us know when we hear 2019, we know 2020 came with so many challenges because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it really, threw a wrench in everybody's plans. And in fall 2022, you conducted an assessment to address issues you noticed within your team. So, how did you approach this unique set of challenges? I think everybody can relate. It was a challenging time.
Yes. Um, COVID-19, as you said, threw a wrench in all the plans. Um, we did the rebranding, and then we had to take a step back from that and be in the real time of what COVID-19 demanded. We were very responsive to our staff needs. We were very flexible in how we approached our work because we had to be. Um, and I think what that did, that level of flexibility, which was not sustainable, meant that we stepped out of our typical ways of working, right?
Mhm.
And what we ended up doing was breaking some of our processes. And so we also had team members who left. And so, the fact that we were being flexible, we were we had lots of workarounds, was partly because we had vacancies on our team, was partly because of what was happening with COVID-19. And so, step forward to 2022, when
Mhm.
things started to settle in again, I realized that there were things falling through the cracks. We just weren't functioning at the level at which we could.
Mhm.
And so at that point, I brought in another consultant to work with us to assess how we were working as a team and why things were falling through the cracks and where were we again? Where did we want to get to?
Mhm.
And then as a team, we would work together to figure out how we got there. So um, I restructured the team based on the feedback from that consultant. And again, that was working with our team to get a sense of what was working, what wasn't. And I brought in a consultant because I wanted honesty. I could have done this, but I feel like people wouldn't have been truthful, not wanting to get their colleagues in trouble. And, not that that would have happened, but I think that's the thinking people have, right? And so, um, and also wanting honest feedback from our clients. And so we got that. We had a sense of the things that weren't working. A part of it was our structure. right? Start acknowledging that we didn't have the right structure in place. Luckily, we had some vacancies that we could rework without impacting human beings. Um, and then we also had some staff members who exited the organization on their own. So that opened up possibilities for our restructure. It wasn't also about just restructuring, though. For us, it was about stepping back and assessing our processes, which, as I said before, many of them had fallen apart. As because of, we were being flexible, we had vacancies on our team. And so we stepped back and looked at 15 of our key processes. And we really interrogated every single one of those processes saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this way? And the response that because this is the way we always did it was not going to be the right one. Where should this sit in the organization? Should it sit with us? Should it sit with another team? Are we going to the right levels for approvals? Like, are we going too far up the chain? Should we be allowing more agency? All of that was a part of the process for us, which was illuminating and very helpful for us in moving forward.
So we here at SHRM, we love our research, and we recently released the 2025 State of the Workplace report earlier this year, and it found insufficient collaboration and support within teams were cited by 25% of U.S. workers as a barrier to that positive employee experience. That's not a small number if you really think about it. Quarter of U.S. employees. So, how did you foster team cohesion and collaboration at the Ford Foundation? We touched on trust a lot, but can you expand on it a little bit more, especially during periods of restructuring and transformation that you led?
Transparency is important. Um, Having people be a part of the process that's going to impact them. So, for example, on my team, the restructure could have been really destructive and disruptive. Um, and, you know, there were points where people were nervous, and I was hearing it directly from some people on my team. I heard it through other people. And so, I tried to be as transparent as possible about the process, what was going to happen next, where we were, um, what we were here, why this was important for us to do, right? And the report that came back, for example, from the consultant, every single person on my team saw that report, which was detailed without revealing confidences, right? But I felt it was important for everybody to see what we were working with and why we needed to change. So, and that was also one of the things that we saw during COVID. Our communication as an executive team stepped up, right? And um, we were inclusive in our communication. We were inclusive in terms of really wanting to hear from others, and then responding to that because one of the worst things you can do is ask people what they think and then put their thoughts in a drawer somewhere and never respond to it. Um, and so just really openness, transparency, communication is key, especially when you're going through changes as an organization.
And your journey really at the Ford Foundation has been one of transformation. It's been such an inspiring, discussion just hearing, just a snippet of all the work you've been doing all these years, but this transformation has been both beneficial for the organization and yourself in your career. So, I would love to leave our audience with some final thoughts. What are some of the real key takeaways you would love our audience to take with them, especially as they may approach themselves unprecedented times and need for change and transformation?
Given that we've gone through so much uncertainty in recent years, and I think it's a given that, that's not all the uncertainty we're going to face. Being a master of organization change management is important for any leader, I think, but particularly for anyone who leads an HR function. Um, I also think that um, really paying attention to employees' well-being, and there's a balance, right? I mean, there's something that the organization can take responsibility for and should, and then there's some things that individuals need to take responsibility and be accountable for. And so but I do think that paying attention to the well-being of the culture of the organization is essential to the success of any organization. I really do believe that. Um, it might be the most important thing to an organization's success, even for organizations or companies that are already successful in
Mhm.
terms of profitability. How much more successful could you be if you had a thriving culture, right? So that for me is the most important thing.
And that brings us back to trust.
It
So
certainly
that's a
does.
full circle right there. All right. Thank you so much, Diane, for providing your wonderful insights, your stories, and your strategies. We truly appreciated those concrete steps when it comes to workplace transformation. So thank you for providing this window to your work.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's been amazing to have this opportunity to tell this story. And although there were some bumps in the road for us, I hope what people take away is that even when there are bumps in the road, or actually because there are bumps in the road, those
Mhm.
are real opportunities to learn and develop and do better.
Love it. Thank you so much. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of All Things Work. Head to shrm.org/all things work to learn more and even sign up for our newsletter. You can also catch us on Shrm's social media. Like, share, comment. We want you to be part of the conversation. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
SHRM.